Hello, my friends, and welcome to the podcast where our goal is to remind you that amidst the chaos and craziness of the world today, there is still plenty of good that is worth shouting about. In each episode, we highlight the stories of another creator of good in the world. Nonprofit, for-profit, it doesn't matter. We know that when you use what you have to add to the world, we can make the world better. This is Creating Good with me, Matt Barnes. Let's create some good. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Creating Good with Matt Barnes. I'm Matt, and you can follow me anywhere online, Matt from Rogue. Man, creating good is just turning out to be one of the most encouraging things in my life, as I get to hear all these stories all the time of people who are creating good and using what they have to do that. And that's the whole point of this movement, is really to get people to be intentional about that. And we want to call you, if you can, not if you can, because you can, I know you can, to help us spread the word about this. We're not looking to raise money. We're not looking, none of that. We just want to spread the word and inspire people to use their resources, their abilities, their whatever it is you have, your relationships, to be intentional about creating good in the world, even in very small ways. So we're having people post online on Instagram and Facebook how they're creating good in the world. Just simple ways that we can be intentional to create good. I shared one the other day that was about how I have conversations with my kids all the time about what's going on at school and help them look for opportunities to create good for other kids on the playground, create good in the classroom, whatever it might be. And it can be small things, but having that intentionality to do it is so important. So we want to hear those stories from you. You can send them to us. There's a form on the website. You can take the Creating Good pledge at creatinggood.co, and you can post on Instagram your story of how you are creating good, or someone you know is, and tag us at creatinggood.co. That's it. And we might repost it because we're trying to spread the word. Let's get this out there. We want to get over 50,000 people to take the pledge this year. So that's the goal, and we are well on our way. Today, we have a really impressive person. His name is Reid Pinckard. He is a dedicated advocate and emerging scholar in the field of political science and news editorial journalism. He is he's a student. I mean, and to hear what he's doing as a college student to make a difference and bring about awareness for preventing and addressing sexual violence through his work with the Sexual Violence Prevention Association and Advocates for Youth is super impressive. I think back to when I was in college and the unimpressive things that I was doing. People like Reid are such a great encouragement for me and motivator. All right, I'm here with Reid Pinckard. Reid, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Absolutely. Now, I don't know if you've had a chance to listen. We open every podcast with a session or a segment we call 3 Random Questions. I've got a list of many, many random questions, and we've randomly chosen 3. Are you ready?
I'm ready as I'll ever be.
Okay,
For
good.
sure.
Well, that's as ready as you can be. All right. Question number 1. I don't know if you'll know the answer to this. What Harry Potter house are you?
I no clue.
Okay.
Did not read Harry Potter or watch it. But if I could choose one and there was no test to tell me and I whatever,
Sure.
I think I would be, what is it, Ravenclaw or whatever, the blue one.
Okay,
That's the one I would choose.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Ravenclaw. I don't know. Honestly, I don't really know them that well. It's just it's in the list, you know. It's actually never been pulled before. That's the first time I think I've gotten that question. Okay. Have you ever been bungee jumping or skydiving?
No, and I'd rather never do them ever, truthfully. You couldn't get me there. No.
Nothing would get you to do that. That's not happening.
Not even money.
No.
Mm-mm. I believe in doing things.
No, go ahead.
I believe in doing things that make you happy, and that just would not make me happy.
Well, that's
Truthfully.
Is it a heights thing? Is it a death thing? Is it what is it?
I think it's a combination of all of them, but
Sure.
also I love a good adrenaline pumping thing, but I'd rather get that at a football game or
Okay.
any other thing. That's too much.
Any other thing.
Anything else.
I like that. Any other thing. Okay. What was the first movie you saw in a movie theater?
Oh my goodness. Truthfully, I think it may have been like Cars.
Oh,
I
okay.
think that's the first movie I can remember seeing in the theaters, like with my family.
Yeah.
So I think it was Cars.
Okay. Young guy. Cars. I was out of college. Okay. So all right. Well, Reed, you did well. You did well on the questions. Even though you didn't know Harry Potter costumes, I kind of respect you more for not knowing that. And then the bungee jumping, skydiving thing. Like, I get it. I've done them, but also I get why you wouldn't want to. Have you ever flown in a helicopter?
No, just an
Oh,
airplane.
okay, okay. The helicopters, it's kind of it's a good in between. Like you get the little bit of the thrill, but it's not as scary as a bungee jump or a
Well,
skydive or something.
I'll add it to the bucket list for
Okay,
sure.
perfect. There you go. All right, let's start with this then. What's your origin story? Where'd you come from, and what are you doing?
Yeah, so I am originally from rural East Texas. My parents are both, well, my dad's a football coach, he was my football coach, my mom's a teacher. So I grew up all around rural East Texas. Most
Okay,
often, if people ask me what town, I'll say Mount Pleasant, Texas, because that's where I graduated from.
okay.
Um, and then that's really where I got started in nonprofit work and like my organizing work. So I started at a crisis center called Safety, that focused on one, rehousing survivors of violence, and also just like all of the therapy stuff and social work and all of those things. And then I'm now up in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where I attend the University of Arkansas.
Okay.
And this is really where my organizing work started to take off. My freshman year, I became a survivor of sexual violence, and
Mm,
I very much decided that that shouldn't happen to anyone else. And then within that discovery of, okay, how can I do this? I also discovered how different it is organizing in this space when you're one, queer, but also two, male presenting.
mm,
So that brought a lot of other avenues in. But since then, I started working specifically with the Sexual Violence Prevention Association, as their director of campus chapters, teaching not only organizing on my campus with the first chapter that's been created, but teaching other people how to organize and do those. And then with that intersection of being queer, male presenting, and seeing a lot of other queer survivors, specifically in the South, not really have stories being publicized, and not being able to discover them, I'm now the founder of an organization called the Queer South, that is striving to platform Southern LGBT plus creatives, through the creation of a zine and hopefully some other projects that are coming pretty soon. But yeah,
nice, awesome. And if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I am 22 years old.
So you are well ahead of the curve for what most 22-year-olds are doing. I want to give you that encouragement. Good job. Uh, you make my 22-year-old self sound very lazy. Uh, so it sounds like you've always been drawn towards helping people, and and then your journey sort of led you toward a specific area of that.
Yeah, very much so. I think it really helped to have parents that were teachers and
Mm,
parents that were really in the community, because a lot of the work that I do, we can talk about the nonprofit space and we can talk about how
sure.
nonprofits function, and it's very business oriented. And I think that's super important to talk about. But for me, it's always been about the community. So regardless of if like our organization has 501c3 status, as long as we're creating a community of people that are able to rely on each other for resources and storytelling and a place to go outside of the regular everyday things that may be bogging us down. That's really where I've gotten my passion from. And I do attribute that to my parents being teachers and being a part of the community and always providing a space for my peers and also the people that were younger than me and older than me. And I think I grew up in a house that you could say had a revolving door, but it wasn't one that was uncomfortable. It was very
Yeah.
comforting.
Yeah. That's really cool. I think a lot of what drives us and what we're doing here and with this podcast and all of the things is really about just community. It's bringing people together. I don't care, whether they're a nonprofit technically or not. It's just people who w- want to make the world a little bit better and can see how we can come together to do that. And the labels sometimes are less helpful in doing that. You can just kind of, it doesn't matter. Like we're all trying to do kind of the same thing in different ways. And for you, as a 22-year-old, as a college student, as you're trying to, kind of take on all these things, what have been some of the biggest challenges for you in doing that, while also I'm assuming being a full time student.
Yeah, so I'm entering my senior year at the University of Arkansas. So I'll
Okay.
graduate in May of 2025. And up to this point, I think it's really a lot of my work centers around a geographical region, so the South.
Okay.
And I think that comes with its own difficulties. And I do not think that that is talked about enough in nonprofit spaces because, regardless of the work that we're doing down here, a lot of the times the credit is either taken from like larger nonprofits, such as like RAIN, or those larger nonprofits may give us the credit, but they're taking the money that we can use to do on the ground, very community oriented work. So I think that's one of the biggest barriers that I've seen is there is a really hard time getting funding as a young organizer under maybe a 501c3 organization or just trying to start an organization and becoming a nonprofit. And then secondly, you also experience a lot of pushback, especially when you're dealing with something such as queer issues and sexual violence. Um, One, just because of the sociology of the South, in which
Sure.
that's the whole point, and we're trying to push back against that. But also, two, I think in the nonprofit space, we have to have a conversation about I think cross-sector organizing and what that looks like. Because a lot of times I feel like right now, a lot of the funding resources is going to climate change work, and I think that is super important, and I think that's really great. But we have to have a conversation on how there is so much money going to that, that you are often overlooking other organizers doing very pivotal work that intersect with climate change spaces. And I think that is
Mm.
also something that I have especially kind of had to deal with. So I think it's like one, getting funding, being small, like being in smaller nonprofits. Two, getting funding while there's a very clear bubble of what's popular in nonprofit spaces and organizing spaces. And then three, being in a geographic region such as the South, organizers get a lot of pushback. And I think that's something we have to talk about more. And how do we provide resources to people like me when you're outside of this region?
I obviously don't live in the South. I know stereotypes, and I've visited and whatever, but so I don't want to I don't want to assume or play into stereotypes. But I would imagine it, from what I understand. Especially doing what you do and operating with dealing with queer issues and all of that in the South is a much different thing than it would be if you were here in Southern California or in New York or something like that.
Yeah, I that is very true, and I wanna make the delineation because, I think a lot of times we have these conversations about what is it like in different geographical regions.
Right.
One, usually when I say the South, I mean the rural South, so I
Yeah.
think I really wanna get that out of the way because being raised in rural East Texas is a different experience than if you were raised in Austin or Atlanta.
Right.
Um, but also, I also wanna say before I dive even further is that there's still homophobia that exists in the queer metropolises of like New York and
Oh, of
LA, and
course. Yes.
there's racism. And yeah, and I know you understand that, but I also always want to say that just because I feel like they'll tend to take away from the issues happening elsewhere. And like I also just want to say that we are a big community. Everything intersects.
Yeah.
Um but it becomes really difficult. One, just like I said, like the sociology of the region and combating the political history and all the things that make up the South, especially because it's so different state by state. I could probably talk for an hour about the political history of Southern states and how different they are and how it makes it more difficult to organize. But I'll not do that too much. But another thing is being an organizer. I've realized that I sometimes get pushback from organizers outside the South. I've had very negative experiences with people that are not familiar with the work and how we have to organize and become nonprofits down here and what those strategies look like. One specific story that sticks in my mind is I was with another organization partnering with them to plan a national walkout. And on my campus, we have a lot of Greek life, and that's a big conversation when it comes to sexual violence organizing. Um, and there were people at a smaller campus at the University of Vermont with very little Greek life, maybe 3
Yeah.
houses, and they had claimed that, "If you support Greek life in any way, we cannot do this, and we can't function in this, like, coalition because of that." And when I was explaining to them, "That's just not how it's going to work here, because that it will exclude a gigantic portion of our population, and also too, that institution's not the problem. There are survivors that exist in those institutions, et
Sure.
cetera." And while giving that conversation, they sat there and they laughed at me and all these other things. So that's just one
Hmm.
very apparent difference and another issue that I kind of deal with being in the South. It's like, oh, we're perceived as more ignorant or anything like that, just because of, I feel like our media portrayal, but also too we're just not getting chances sometimes based on our like resource allocation.
Yeah. So you've got, I mean, your nonprofit work is already hard enough. Any cause-based work, I think, is you're up against challenges. Things are being politicized, and by the nature of it, you're fighting against something. Uh, on top of that, like you're dealing with the things that you're talking about here. How do you do that? How do you change your approach so that you can fight those battles or know which ones are worth fighting? And what's your approach been?
I think one of the biggest things, and one of my favorite things of being an organizer, and especially, I know I'm still very young, but there are high school students across the country, junior high students that I've been able to mentor and help in other organizations. That's been really awesome. And one thing that I always tell them is that sometimes cliches are true.
Okay.
And I think that when we think about what it takes to stay true to yourself in these moments, it's the fact that like abiding by that was misworded. But abiding by cliches, like stay true to yourself and just like acknowledge who you are and
Yeah.
like hold what you value most close to your chest in these moments. Because what you value most gives you hope. And I think that that is the biggest thing that I've had to tell myself over and over and over again, because I think so many times people have tried to strip away the idea that change can happen. I mean, you experience doxing, you experience this like lack of institutional care like right in front of your face, and
Yeah.
it's hidden by these smiles and all of these different issues. But the one thing that allows me to continue caring and having hope is very much staying true to myself and kind of believing in the cliches that everyone always says like at galas or anything like that. And then secondly, I think it's just very much like knowing when to say no. I
Yeah.
think in that moment where I was getting laughed at in that meeting, the next day I said, "I can no longer do this. This is not good for me. We can achieve a walkout at a later date. There's no progress being done here." And I think for me, the space is not what I need it to be. But please, if you ever want to work again, reach out. So it's that how do we say no without burning bridges type of thing, which I
Sure.
will also say that sometimes bridges need to be burned. I'm
Oh,
just gonna
yeah.
be very upfront about that. But I think those are the two things I very much keep in mind when it comes to taking care of myself and like dealing with all the issues I just described.
Yeah, yeah. What on your campus have you faced a lot of those same issues as well, or is it more in the, expanding beyond the boundaries of where you're at?
I mean, I think so the my a lot of my work up until this point has been sexual violence organizing. So I kind of started outside the bubble of my
Mhm.
campus and then brought it in. So the SVPA is a national organization, and I started working for them as an intern. And I said, "Hey, I want to do this because there are other campus chapter projects for sexual violence, but there's a lot to be learned in those projects that have been around for so long, and they have a lot of gaps that they need to fill." And that was my goal in starting a new project because our organization focuses specifically on prevention. And I think that's a good thing that a lot of nonprofits are turning to is this like, okay, what's the root cause of like homelessness? What's the root cause of food
Sure.
insecurity? How do we solve that? And that's the gap that I wanted to fill in. So bringing that to campus, um, was difficult for multiple reasons. On campus, I think the biggest difficulties, one, is the fact that our campus, compared to other campuses outside of this region, um, could care less about political issues or like social issues. It's very hard to get people energized and to care, because we are a PWI, but we're a PWI that exists in basically the Ozark Mountains and the land of Walmart with the one of the best business schools in the country. And so trying to engage on that has been very difficult, and trying to start a movement can be very
Yeah.
difficult. But there may be power in numbers, but that does not say how many numbers you need to have. So
Right, right,
whether
right.
it's 3 or 30 people, it's been okay. I also think, like, just talking about, like, rampant homophobia, racism, and all of these other things that exist on campus has made it very difficult. And just there's a lot of personal stories there. And then finally, like I said earlier, institutional care is a really big thing. There's a lot of people a part of the university that when you're a young organizer and you're a youth organizer on a college campus, a lot of times they're waiting for you to graduate and they're waiting for you to leave.
Yeah.
So these people that have had to deal with me for the past 3 years know that it's my final year, and it's creating something that has the longevity to continue having an impact on campus, and to continue expanding. So I think that's kind of really the final thing that's super difficult is just creating an organization that has longevity, but also still battling with the institution as it exists.
Yeah. How are you doing that? What are you doing sort of set up a longer term plan?
One, being annoying. I think constant emails I think constant emails are super important, and if I can change it within a year, that would be amazing, and I'm not gonna stop saying that. Of course, I'm very reasonable with myself and, like, know that
Yeah.
that's probably not going to happen, but I'm gonna do everything in my power to keep being the person that is always in your inbox. I think
Yeah.
that that is one thing people are super scared of, especially as young people, because we grow up in a place where, okay, well, I know I'm 22 and everyone around me has a PhD and is a professor. That does not matter.
No.
That holds no weight off campus. I don't care if you are a doctor or whatever. Like, I care from the
Yeah.
standpoint of
Yeah. Yeah.
you're respectable, but when it comes down to this whole, like, okay, the chancellor is this and the I don't really care what the chancellor's done because these people are hurting.
Yeah.
And I think at a certain point that I don't care attitude needs to blend in with this work, and continue being annoying. And then secondly, it's just like I think when we talk about longevity, we have to prepare people to take over. And it's a very difficult thing because I know how passionate I am about something. So it's trying to get someone else, one or two people just as passionate as you to continue doing that. So I think that's where kind of mentorship, but I don't even want to call it mentorship because we're so close in age, but kind of friendship comes into this.
Yeah.
Friendship with boundaries, especially on a college campus. I would tell a lot of young organizers on college campuses and in high school is make friends within this work. If you
Yeah.
have friends within this work, one, you can rely on them. But two, if you have friends that are 1 to 2 years younger than you know this is going to continue going on because this is what you kind of like find interest over.
Hmm.
And then outside of those spaces, you can find interest over other things. So I think that's two of the things. Remain annoying and have friends that want to continue the work.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm assuming have been doing that, identifying people to kind of have a succession plan in place, if for lack of a better term.
Trying my best. Again, it's very difficult because the campus climate at the University of Arkansas specifically, and a lot of other Southern and SEC campuses, um, like sexual violence is a taboo issue, which I think is true for a lot of spaces, but like
Sure.
especially on a camp like a college campus, and which like last summer I was dealing with a football player that had been accused of sexual violence and trying to see where that was going, and then over the years we've seen other issues such as like paying perpetrators
Sure.
after like undergoing some sort of trauma that they claimed like happened in the Title IX process instead of like helping survivors or anything like that. So I like have a group of like 2 to 3 people that I've been able to rely on and people that are younger than me that I think are very passionate about this work. And I'm very excited to see what's going to happen moving forward. But also like I think even in the case that it does end, which is we see a lot of specifically campus groups and nonprofit projects burn out. I think that there will still be a culture of prevention there. Like, I don't think that, like, the impact that we make goes away once we leave, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, it may suck if, like, the group that I'm a part of dissolves because there's no one to move it forward, but I don't know, I feel like when you're an alumna, you're an alumna, and
Yeah.
there's a way to, like, still have some power in that, you know? It's like,
Yeah.
how do we flip this on its head, and how do we keep having an impact outside of that? Like, my work doesn't stop after I graduate. Like,
Right.
I don't do this because I'm applying for PhD programs or because I did this because for me, it was something that was super crucial for me to find community when I felt like I had no one at all.
Right.
So I think that's very something that I'm trying to keep in mind as I move forward.
So yeah, and I mean, I think that's one of the things I always like to remind myself is, just because something that I was working on or doing maybe didn't last or in that form. There's other ways for me to express that later, but then also, you know, the people that it impacted during that time, that still matters. Like just because it's
Yeah.
not doing that thing now, and yeah, of course, you would love to see things go on forever, but sometimes that's just not in the cards. Um, as you're dealing with, like like you were saying, blatant sometimes homophobia or racism or the things that come up. How often does that come up in a more blatant way, and how do you approach that?
I think oftentimes when it's blatant, it's in like this passive standpoint. So like I'll be standing in like the dining hall and
Yeah,
someone will come up behind me and make a comment that like I like don't want to utter again just because it was so
sure,
like
of
just
course.
awful and things like that. But when usually when we're like in meetings, I think people, especially on a college campus, have learned to cover it up. I think that
Yeah.
when I said that there's like homophobia and racism and all these other systemic issues everywhere, it's
Yeah.
like on a college campus, it becomes like this little metropolis, if that makes sense, like an
Yeah,
urban
for
area,
sure.
no matter where you are. And people are able to cover it up in this very in this way that like you have to learn to
Yeah.
like if you're a part of the community, you can see it, but if you're not a part of whatever community that they just like placed a microaggression against, you have to learn why
Yeah.
people are saying the certain things that they're saying. So I think more the blatant homophobia comes in like just very one passive interactions, but two in spaces that happen off campus. Because I think that w- many college campuses are doing a really good job at providing spaces for marginalized students. Um, but yeah, I really think that like when it comes to the rampant issue, it's becoming more hidden, and then we'll have, like, crazy acts committed. Like, I think last month, our College of Arts and Sciences, the dean's office got defaced, and there was, like, a swastika in it and, like, scratched off all of the yeah. So that like, it's really it like, there's a lot of acts, that commit some sort of hatred, and it sucks, but it's become this, like, "Okay, well, we're gonna vandalize this office instead of
Yeah.
whatever," and all of these other things, and also, it's just kind of hard to see, like, when these strings of violence do occur because it's so easy to hide, I think at certain points, depending on who got the information first.
Right.
So, that was a really, like, rambly
No, it was
explanation of
great.
kind of what that experience looks like, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like I said, like, in the nonprofit space, you're already up, or in just the advocacy kind of space, you're already up against it. But then to add those layers on top of it, I can't imagine the amount of uh difficulty that causes, both emotionally and just practically, even of like, how do we accomplish the things that we need to accomplish? And I think, dealing with sexual violence issues, I'm always shocked. I'm always shocked when I hear about any of those types of things, and I shouldn't be at this point. I should be, probably expecting that kind of stuff. But the sexual violence stuff too, how prevalent that is, and how much people work to hide it, just the way you were describing with the homophobia and the racism. How do you, with something like that tends to be hidden and not talked about, something that is uncomfortable for a lot of people? How do you bring about the awareness? Like, is it storytelling? Is it creating safe spaces? Is it what does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all of those things. I think one, storytelling is the basis for I feel like any major social movement. We saw
Sure.
that with BLM. We saw that with the Me Too movement. We're going to continue seeing that. I mean, that's the reason that York SVPA at like the University of Arkansas started was the storytelling. So one, creating a safe space where stories can be told. But in the same way, like how are we going to tell these stories without getting people like in legal trouble? Because a lot of times we're seeing this new wave of legal attempts to silence survivors. So we talk about defamation lawsuits. We saw that with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard and
Right.
like all of these big issues. So now we're having to find these new ways to tell stories that are not going to end up like getting us in trouble as an organization, but also getting a survivor in trouble in this like
Right.
weird like universe that we're now living in which people can no longer tell a story that has happened to them and without it being combated. Um, but also beyond that, I think something that's really crucial within the sexual violence space, and when we talk about prevention and all these other things, is education. So we have to start destigmatizing what sex is at a very young age. When we
Yeah.
talk about the sexual violence prevention movement, I think a lot of people, yes, crisis centers, they do a really good job, blah, 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 all of these things. One of my biggest qualms with a lot of people that talk about crisis centers and saying that they're the solution is their whole point is they're waiting for people to become survivors so that they can help them. And
Yes.
I think that is awesome work. And that's where I started. I think that they need to exist. None of that. But when we start to talk about organizations like the SVPA and like End Rape on Campus and all these other organizations, they're talking about prevention efforts, and that starts at the educational level. We see that with like CCUS and Educate Us, that they're trying to implement new policies in these places that do not have sex education from pre-K all the way through 12th grade. And we've seen with the lack of sex education, especially from the South, Southern states have higher rates for sexual violence. Arkansas is number one for rates of sexual violence, and the only sex education that you receive, if any, one is a puberty video at like in sixth grade, and two, abstinence only education. Like, foregoing that is what is causing a rise in violence and also just like teen pregnancy and all these things that like conservative lawmakers want to make like a pawn in a political game.
Right.
Um, when at the end of the day, when we talk about prevention and we talk about moving forward, one, storytelling, but two, this educational piece cannot be forgotten. Once we destigmatize what sex is, people can point out the signs like, hey, that made me uncomfortable. Like, I need to tell someone about that, and all these other things. And there's a slew of other like policy proposals and all of this stuff that can happen. But I think one of the biggest things that like we can do right now, and I think is very reasonable the next 10 to 20 years, is comprehensive sex ed, and hitting all the points that kids need to know and like young adults need to know
Yeah.
getting in here. Because I know so many people that are my age that have no clue half of the like
Yeah.
curriculum that's in sex education.
I was at a dinner a couple nights ago with some friends, and we were just, going around asking stupid questions, and I said, how did you find out about sex? Who taught you? Like,
Yeah.
did your parents have what? Did your parents have the talk? And everybody, and it was crazy. Like, no one at the table, their parents had a talk with them. Not one, only me.
No.
and and mine was not a thorough or effective talk in any way. And it was just crazy. Like, and it wasn't school. It was like, you hear about it, like, and no one had any real education on it. You get
Yeah.
this, like, and you might think like, oh, that, in a very conservative state like Arkansas or something like that, that would be, but these are all people in California, so it's not like it's better here. It's everywhere. Sex is
Yeah.
this thing that's just, people are afraid to, I'm a father of 5 young kids, and uh kind of like, when do you start introducing these things, that kind of thing. But like, the reality is, they start asking questions early, and you don't need to go into every little detail, but like, the way we push things off, and I think it starts stigmatizing things unintentionally very young.
Yeah, and I think that, like, there's a question like, everyone is always talking about like, when you have young children, right,
Hmm.
and we talk
Yeah.
about sex education, there is no need to give an anatomy lesson at 5 years old, but if
Right.
we teach children about boundaries through something as simple as sharing,
Yeah.
that is literally perfect sex education that you can attribute to something like people, like, literally just touching your body. Like,
Yes.
if we can teach children, like, "Hey, I don't like when you touch me," that's completely okay, or teaching people, like, if you wanna give someone a hug, you need to ask first. Just something as simple as
Yes.
that at
Yes.
ages of 3 to 5 years old, and, like, just like, I think that's oftentimes, like, when we talk about sex education and comprehensive sex education, of course, it gets caught up on, like, "Oh my god, people are gonna learn about gay sex." Okay, 1, like, you probably wouldn't hear about gay sex until about high school, which is, like, not abnormal, there's gay people in high school and
Yeah.
before then. Um, but, like, it's caught up in this very, like, I don't know, I think trigger happy way of throwing out, like, just, like, these, like, remarks that are caught up in jargon and
Yeah.
politics and all this stuff, and I'm just like, it's very frustrating because we're like, we can sit here and have a conversation. I don't have children, and,
Yeah.
like, I don't know how long it'll be till I have children, but this understanding of, like, "Oh my goodness, like, my kids understand sharing, and, like, how do we blend this into a lesson on, like, this your body is your body," you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Totally. And without making it is a balancing act, because it's also, I don't want them to live their lives in fear of people who want to give them a hug. But at the same time, like, we're always talking about, like, our kids are that don't have a great sense of stranger danger. They love people, they love introduce, but and I'm like, I love that they love people. I love that they can, but also now I'm like, okay, wait, we got to balance that out, because some people aren't safe. And I think that, we're trying to have that intentionality of finding that balance, and people tend to want to not find balance. They want to find the easy way out. So it's either, oh, we're not going to talk about that at all, or we're going to scare the hell out of you, or whatever it is. And neither of those things is super effective or helpful.
No, and I think that that is just, like, very like, you hit it right on the nose. I think a lot of people the history of sex education is very weird. Just from the standpoint of, like, it has always, like, kinda been a fear tactic. Like, I feel like a lot of, like, the white feminist perspective of like sexual violence and like preventing sexual violence, which I've like seen firsthand in the state of Arkansas. Um, when people like come from out of state to like try and implement policies that like and they have no understanding of what's going on here. It's
Yeah.
this like big fear tactic of like we need to put people in jail and we need to do that one. That's not prevention work. Like
No.
sexual violence still occurs if you put another person behind bars. And
Yes.
like two, like let's stop scaring people. Like children don't like you're saying. I like it hurts my heart to see children scared because they think that when they hit the streets that like and they're walking down like a literally during the day like in a neighborhood that they're going to be hurt. That
Yeah.
is so upsetting
Yeah.
because those things can be prevented. And I
Yeah.
think that that's a conversation that needs to occur more.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's obviously a very complicated topic in a lot of ways, because even as you're talking, I'm thinking about how, like the boundaries thing with hugs and that type of thing. Like I was very much raised in, go give them a hug. Go give them, and I know it was well intentioned or whatever, but and I'm not of that mindset, obviously, with my kid. Well, not obviously. I'm not of that mindset with my kids, but I have to make that because I was raised that way. I have to make that. It's a very conscious decision still,
Mhm.
especially with close relatives and things like that. Like, oh, go give grandma a hug or, whatever. Oh,
Yeah.
wait, I've got it. And people don't like to change or don't
Yeah.
like to admit that the way that they were raised wasn't the best way, and that their parents weren't perfect or whatever it might be. And so there's so many layers in these very personal issues, that are so specific to each individual and how to approach it, that it's very complicated, and it's very hard to come up with a one fits all sort of approach to doing this. So, man, you've definitely got your work cut out for you. And but I'm so impressed, especially, at your age, jumping in and being like, no, I'm gonna take this stuff on is really cool.
Thank you so much. No, I really appreciate it. Yeah, I think everyone should just continue fighting the good fight, contribute where you can. Truthfully, I think that community is the ground that we all stand on, and I think
Yeah.
finding community that fits you and helps solve these issues is super crucial for sure. And that's really where I'm getting at.
Yeah. Awesome. What is the thing, as kind of a closing question, what is the thing in your work that gives you the most joy? What's the best part for you?
Oh, I think truthfully, it's storytelling. I
Yeah.
think storytelling, like kind of like we talked about earlier, storytelling has created community in so many different ways for me. Right now, so the Queer South has a zine project going on, and we're taking submissions until the end of August. We started this project in March, like launched it on social media and everything, and already have over 50 submissions. And I've started reading through some of the stories I've gotten to see, and I mean, I literally tear up. It is something that is so powerful to see people one feel comfortable enough to like trust me and the two other people I'm working with to like read a story that is like so personal, but also tells such a like it's a unique perspective, but we can all find something to find like that
Yeah.
impacts us in it. Um, but yeah, I really think that what helps me move forward is being able to read those stories and like when that zine comes out, people are going to want to read it. They're going to want to see the information in it because they know that there's something in there for them and that's why it was created. And I think it's going to create community across like bounds, like distance and across all of these different things. And I cannot wait to see what comes out of that. And just in general, I think even my sexual violence prevention work, I've gotten the chance to work with other organizations this past summer and travel and meet other young organizers just like me that taught me a lot in a week span that I had no clue of because I feel so isolated, at sometimes where I'm at.
Yeah.
So I really think it's storytelling and community building. Those things provide hope, and I think again, everyone should be finding their community, because at the end of the day, that's really what's going to help you. You can
Yep.
rely on a lot of things, but I think truthfully, the institution will never be one of them. But you can rely on your neighbors across the street.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for being here, Reed. Where can people find more information about what you're doing and connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, follow me, like see me on LinkedIn,
Okay.
Reid Pinckard, just my name. Also on Instagram, it's literally at Reid Pinckard. But as far as projects, UARK SPPA's Instagram is at UARK, UARK SPPA.
Okay.
And then the Queer South is literally how it's spelled. But on Instagram, it's at the Queer South Scene. And then we just made a LinkedIn today. So if you want to
There
see
you go.
us on LinkedIn, go for it. But that's where most of my work is happening. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Reid, for being here. It's been great talking to you, and I'm so excited to see what you do next.
Thank you.
Creating Good with Matt Barnes is recorded at Rogue Collective in beautiful Newport Beach, California. It's hosted and executive produced by me, Matt Barnes. Post-production is by our amazing friends over at Fame, the B2B podcast agency. Writing is by Matt Barnes and Taylor Bolanos from Rogue Creatives. Creative direction and design is overseen by Corey Hill of Rogue Creatives. Theme music is composed and performed by Jared Atherton of Chapters. Huge thanks to our amazing guests for joining us this episode, and thank you to all of you incredible listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, and I would imagine you did if you're still listening, so don't forget to help us spread some good by giving us a good review. Preferably like 5 stars, lots of really nice words. It's very helpful. Also, tell your friends and subscribe so we can come straight into your potholes each and every time we have a new episode. Take the Creating Good pledge on our website at creatinggood.co. We'll catch you next time. This has been a Rogue Creatives production.